hurting people has gone places in video games, but also in real life. We've gone beyond just clicking or holding down a button to do extra stuff. Now, we also have timing and stuff. My earliest encounter with that was in FF8 with the Gunblade. I did not encounter a lot of games that had that sort of thing defensively. Defensive options, at least in the games I've played, I've always felt a little limited. They didn't feel bad, but they felt like a different version of being somewhere most of the time. Shooters I encountered, for example, was mostly about cover, which is just you hiding behind things, which is also just not being somewhere, and that somewhere is outside of cover. This would later be upgraded to cover shooters, which had a button that magnetized you to walls, which in some ways simplified combat, because when you're attached to cover, buttons were reduced to blind fire or aim and fire. You traded your ability to move for automatic cover, and to focus on shooting rather than moving and shooting at the same time. Movement, however, still reigned as king in most games, and also movement shooters became a thing. So I tried to learn movement, and by learn movement, I mean I learned to move my cursor onto heads. Poorly. Movement as a defensive option didn't really appeal to me. It only appealed to me as in I had to take space at a certain spot before the other guy did, and that did appeal to me. That was taking control. But for the most part, I just focused on shooting first, shooting again, and shooting anyone who asked a question. Though I do want to say that I appreciate the immense amount of skill that goes into movement shooters, or any sort of movement, really. Props to you all. From what I played, defense was a matter of moving, zooming, or hurting things real hard, real fast. Maybe a block button if, you were feeling fancy. But I do understand why the focus was on offense for the longest time. Offense is fun. A lot of people tend to gravitate towards being the DPS in hero shooters. I understand that. Although I do fully believe it's because when you're the DPS, when you're the damage, when you're the offense, you take the initiative. As the DPS or offense, you determine not just what happens, but when it happens. Things change when you act. Mentally, I understand and have internalized that defense wins games and is the most sound strategic approach to a situation most of the time. But to most people who just want to have fun, who are logging on after a long day at class or at work, offense is just more exciting too. You don't have to wait for anybody. People have to wait for you. People have to pay attention to you. Additionally, offense transforms a difficult enemy into a difficult memory. And very few games allow for difficult memories to hassle you. They don't say the best offense is a good defense for a reason. Going on the offensive feels like you're moving forward. Most forms and instances of defense are delaying, a holding pattern. Worse, they're seemingly passive, or a matter of making sure something didn't or does not happen. Seeing something not happen is rarely as exciting as... It's been a while since I really got into multiplayer games, but we don't have a dramatic callout for a critical heal like saved by or denied. Well, maybe tower denied, but that's not quite the same. Celebrating defense doesn't happen a lot. Even fighting games have had a bit of a problem here, at least from what I can remember from Tekken 8. Tekken 8 apparently had a bit of an offensive problem, not that kind of offensive problem, where it wasn't about knowing how to protect your face, but making sure your fist was faster or had less frames than Xiao Yu's foot or something. Even in the single-player games that I do play, I could often boil down victory to an alpha strike. Nothing really stopped me from unloading most of my offense from the start. But slowly, defense got its time in the limelight. Sifu was a beat-em-up that focused heavily on defensive mechanics, as you'd be unable to make headway without it. It made parries and dodges a key mechanic rather than just a novelty. All-out offense was simply not an option. You would have to defend yourself at some point. Arguably, offense in that game was nowhere near as important as countering, especially in the story mode. Sekiro leaned heavily into the timing part of the parry system and was, well, not really a Souls-like, but it was kind of one, in that it was an expansion and refocusing of a Dark Souls' game's defensive mechanics. But those two games felt like defense was the selling point. Additional defensive mechanics in those games were the point. You know what I mean? It's not like it was part of the genre or something you would come to expect. Those defensive mechanics set them apart from other games rather than made them part of a family of those games. So they felt like outliers, really. But then, I played Doom, The Dark Ages. I had never been so happy playing a Doom game. I know it wasn't the first time defense was part of a game rather than its USP, although it is very much the Dark Ages selling point as well. The thing is, Doom The Dark Ages gave me the most beautiful words I've ever heard in a shooter. stand and deliver. Dodging was still viable, and in fact still part of your defensive repertoire. But blocking, defending, parrying, being up close and personal, that was a little bit new. And it gave me an offhand weapon too. Apparently the Doomslayer got weaker over time because this is a prequel and almost everything is used one-handed because his other hand was exclusively for hurling circular saws at demons and bitch-slapping anything green-colored back to sender. What the shield gave me, parrying, I found terribly exciting. Parrying was exciting. It was active defense. It forced me to look at movement and other cues, made me pay attention, made me look danger in the eye and defy it. And I loved that. I got to look at the cool thing the demons are doing and then whack it away with a button and a lot of timing. Isn't that exciting? Isn't that fun? And that was kind of my flashpoint for this entire thing, because that's when I realized, wow, a lot of things that didn't have active defense beyond movement have a lot of examples now, huh? Doom and Expedition 33 are the premier examples for this for a lot of people, though I'm pretty sure expanded active defensive options were lurking around for a little bit. For them, it was a genre that suddenly had a bit more in the defensive line. Movement or precise and fast offense was the name of the game for shooters, while stats were the primary line of defense for turn-based games. Now, parries existed, something exciting and just as viable, if not more optimal at times, as moving. And not being somewhere or being somewhere. And to my joy, it is not just those two games that have that. I looked around and there's way more games that added defense. Absalom, an upcoming beat-em-up, has a parry built into its character's dash, and you can dash up and down as well, increasing your mobility. Also, the game looks amazing. Astral Ascent, a roguelite side-scroller that came out, I think, last year, has a character that can parry, whereas everyone else just has movement to defend themselves with. Take a guess on which one is my favorite. Neon Inferno, an upcoming game, lets you parry, so it's not just a race to shoot things before the screen overwhelms you. And if you hold down the parry button, lets you redirect the shots, adding a bit more complexity and control over your defense. Space Marine 2. It's not a novel addition to the game, it's part of the core gameplay, as it lets you set up executions that give you armor and increase your survivability. Dynasty Warriors, this ancient game franchise dating into my early teens, now has a parry in Dynasty Warriors Origins, and is actually one of the more forgiving versions of it, as you can invisible parry mid-attack animation. In that, if you time your parry, if you press the button at the correct time, you will still parry an attack even if you're mid-attack. Also, it has a bunch of other mechanics that are new to the series and I kind of find really cool, so check that out. I don't know, now that I'm looking, it just feels like a golden era to be mindfully defensive. And I like that. Somewhere along the line, active defense became a bigger part of games rather than a novelty. I mean, I love parrying, so that's where my head's at. It's far more exciting for me to stand and deliver rather than maneuver. I know that's not true for many people, but it's true for me. And I think it's exciting to see this stuff in games that don't traditionally have it, like beat-em-ups and turn-based RPGs. I think it's cool, for one thing. If we have to pay attention to what the enemies are doing, we're looking at it, which lets us observe qualities in design and appreciate them better. It's a great sensory experience. It allows for a bit more storytelling. If offense isn't king, the game has more room to breathe, letting you experience the supposed difficulties involved in a more dramatic underdog story, for example. I mean, it might be a me problem, but when I can boil things down to offense in a game, I stop looking at it like an experience and it becomes more of a numbers game, an Excel file with fancy graphics. Offense, in my experience, is all about alpha striking, I mentioned earlier, which I feel is like playing the least amount of game, because the enemies are no longer engaging. And I have a weird thing where if I can see the optimal routes, I can't let go of it. Like, put me in Metal Gear where there are 100 solutions to the same problem, and I'll gravitate towards the easiest or most expedient one. I have to be forced into creativity. It also gives games more levers to pull. More things to consider for the mechanically inclined, just more room as a whole for there to be a game. It's not for all games, granted. I just think it's a good thing that when it is applicable, we have more ways to play games. Thanks for watching, that was fun to think and talk about. I'm Patinator, I'll see you later.